Alright, the last part of this project is to put our character into a scene or into a background that he can walk through. Now, if I was to go and test my movie now, you can see all he's doing is just walking kind of in mid-space. And if you look at the setup of my document, I've got him in the middle of my stage, and our layers just has one layer and one frame. Then the reason why it's animating without so many other frames is because he's a movie clip, and that movie clip is going to play over and over again. When we add our background, we want the background to also be playing over and over again. So as he's walking to the right, our background is going to be scrolling to the left. So to set this up, let's go to our Layers panel. I'm going to rename Layer 1 our walking character. And I'm going to lock it down just so I don't accidentally mess up that particular layer. Let's make a new layer, put it below the walking layer, and then let's rename it background. From here, we can go to File and import to the library the little Background Factory Illustrator file. Now, since it's an Illustrator file, it's going to ask you some import options. We're just going to say import, and that will import it directly to our libraries panel. You can see now I've got a Background Factory Illustrator file, and if you double click on the icon, it'll open up the editor, and let's see how this has been laid out. First off, you'll notice in the timeline there are three different layers: a front or foreground, a middle ground, and a background. And we want each of these different layers to be scrolling at different speeds. And so to set this up has to be done in a very particular way. Let's take it and break it down as simple as possible. I'm going to click and drag each of the layers down just to make it easier to understand how these are set up. And if I zoom in, the artwork is set up so that the left side perfectly matches and aligns up to the right side. And so as this artwork is scrolling along, when it reaches to the end, notice that the two sides will perfectly match up and it'll look like it's infinitely looping. So that's kind of how this is nice and set up. However, as it scrolls, we want to make sure it scrolls back into the same position, or at least the same look. So the first thing we need to do is to make a copy of each part of the artwork. Let's start off with the foreground or the front image first. I've got it selected. Holding down my Option key and my Shift key, I will click and drag it to the left until the left edge and the right edge are touching right there. Notice a little guide comes up and makes it easy to snap that right to the edge. If for some reason you didn't see that guide, you can always go to View, down to Snapping, and then turn on Snap to Objects and Snap Align. That'll make it much easier to drag those and have them perfectly aligned with each other. Okay, so now that I've got a left and a right side selected, we'll select both of the objects, so you can click and drag over both of them, and we need to convert this to a movie clip. So let's go to Modify, Convert to Symbol. We'll call this BG1. The type is going to be a movie clip. We'll say OK. This may take just a second to save up. But once it does, you can see I've got BG1 inside of our library. Let's do the same thing for the middle ground. Click on the middle artwork, hold down Option and Shift, and you click and drag. We'll snap it to that side. There we go. Then we need to select both of those two copies. Go to Modify, Convert to Symbol. We'll call this BG2. Remember, it's going to be a movie clip. We'll say OK to that. And then let's do the same thing for our background. Select that, Option and Shift, click and drag, and we'll snap both of those together as well. Select both of those, so the left and the right are both selected. Go to Modify and convert that to a symbol that we'll call BG3. Again, it's going to be a movie clip because we want it to move over and over again. Now we can return back to scene 1 in our main stage. To animate each of the backgrounds, so BG1, 2, and 3, we need to double click on their icons. Let's do BG1 first. Double clicking on that, we'll go into our edit mode. I'm going to back out just a little bit so I can see it. And in our layers timeline, we want the foreground, so this background layer 1, to be the fastest moving. And we want to kind of keep it up with the pace of our character. So in our timeline, let's go to roughly the 85th frame, and we'll insert a keyframe here. So insert timeline. Let's do a regular keyframe. Remember, you can hit 6, and that will do that. So by the 85th keyframe, we want everything to slide to the left. Now, how far it goes is very important. Notice that you get a little center point. Oops, let me scroll back in. A center point to where your artwork is. Oh, I'm losing it. There it is right here. So there's a little crosshair right there. That's going to be very, very important when we move it. So select your artwork. Select both sides of it. Again, hold down the Shift key. Click and drag. And we want to drag it till the edge of it hits right in the center of that crosshair. When I let go, you can see the edge of it. And if you need to, you can use your arrow keys to kind of nudge it either backwards or forwards. That looks pretty good right there. I can even zoom in. We'll go back to that left edge. You can see it right there. So that crosshair used to be where the center point is, and now all I've done is shifted it to the left and replaced it with this artwork. If we go back to our timeline, we can select frame number 1, and let's turn on a classic tween by going to Insert, Classic Tween, and you can see the tweening motion that it will create. It may take just a second to do it, but once it's finished, we can even zoom out. You can see the movement it's going to do. So moving from the left side to the right side. Since there's a lot of information, it's going to go kind of slowly, but I'll stop it from there. We can go back to scene 1. Let's choose BG2, so double click on the icon for it and repeat the same process. But for this one, we want it to scroll a lot slower than the other one. So for this one, rather than going to frame 85, let's go all the way to frame, we'll say 120. With frame 120 selected, let's insert our timeline, another keyframe. Selecting both of them, hold down the Shift key, click and drag to the left until the little edge lines right up with the center mark, which is right there. Again, if you need to use your arrow keys, you can nudge it back till it's nice and centered. Then we'll return to frame number 1, and we need to insert a classic tween, which will tween it from the starting position back to its ending position. That's what we're looking for. Let's go back to scene number 1 again, and then finally let's go to our background number 3, double click on the icon, and repeat this same process. So for this one, the first one went 85 frames, the other one went roughly 120. We're going to let this one go much slower at 140 frames. So with 140th frame selected, we'll go to Insert, another keyframe. Then we'll select both sides of our artwork. Holding down Shift, we're going to drag it to the midpoint. So it's going to start and end right here. Then when we go back to our first frame, we'll insert a classic tween. So it'll frame it back to that starting and stopping point. Now let's go back to scene 1 and build out our background. We'll start off with background 3 first. Let's drag it onto our stage, and we'll place it so that it starts right there. That top left edge is aligned to it. Same way for background 2. Click and drag it onto the stage, and then we'll replace it so it's nice and aligned to that left edge as well. And then finally, background 1, we'll place it onto our stage by clicking and dragging. This one has a lot of information, so it may take a little time to load up. And then we'll place this onto the bottom of our stage. If you need to, you can now unlock your character and reposition him. Had 2 layers selected. And reposition your character so that he is on top of the stage and is an appropriate height and scale. Now, when we go to test it, we can go to Control and Test, and you can see our character is now walking inside of our parallax environment. Pretty cool. All right, we'll close this up. When you're finished, save this Flash file, and I want you to export it as a movie. Go to File, down to Export, choose Export Movie. The file format will be an SWF movie, and we're going to call this Walking Hero Parallax. Save it to the desktop. That SWF movie is what you're going to upload to show me the walking sequence for your character. Now, as far as the jumping and waiting, I also want you to save that as just your regular Flash file and try to upload that to Moodle or send it to me as a link in an email.